Hi, Melanie Muenchinger here, illustrator for Gina K Designs. Today I have a project for you with my best-selling set, A Year of Flowers, and I took the inspiration for this card from two different cards in my A Year of Flowers book from Annie's Publishing. I have a technique in December which is stained glass embossing, and that is basically just embossing with embossing powder onto some vellum paper and then coloring on the back side. I also had a project featuring the same technique but in red and gold. And when I create these projects for my books, I have to create all of the pieces separately to make these step out pictures. Once I send them in, they photograph them, and then when the book is finished, they send them back to me. So I have this card in 5 different steps, and I keep them on hand. Every once in a while, I will just use that as a mat for a new card that I need, and always realize that there are more Christmas cards that I need that I'm thinking about. So I thought, you know, what if I put this gold layer with this vellum layer that I showed you here. And I found that layered, I thought this looked really pretty together. So I'm going to be showing you this technique today. The products and tools that you'll need for this particular project are the A Year of Flowers stamp set. I have some cardstock today. We're going to be using the vellum paper, not the cardstock, which is thicker and which you would use a stylus on to do impressed embossing. That's just going to be a little bit thicker and a little bit more opaque, so use the vellum paper. This is 3.5 by 4 3/4. Then you're going to be using some white cardstock. This is the Gina K Pure Luxury White. It's 3 3/4 by 5. And finally, I have some of the Gina K Pure Luxury Good as Gold cardstock. This is gorgeous, if you can see that shine, for holiday cards. This is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And then finally, we have the powder blue base. That's Pure Luxury as well. For the ink pads, we're going to be using some Versamark. This is a watermarking ink, which is gorgeous for backgrounds, but it's also sticky, so this is what you're going to use anytime you're going to do wet embossing on your cards. I have the Gina K Blue Denim. I'm also going to be using a greeting stamp from Teresa Momber's Peace and Joy set, which just came out for the holidays. Have some markers for coloring on the back of that vellum. I've got the Spectrum Noir TB4, TB5, and CG4 for that flower. We have some embossing powders. I have a white here and a gold. I really like to have the fine detail for this really tiny line art image. You'll also need a heat gun to do that embossing. And you're either going to need some vellum adhesive to attach the vellum. I know not a lot of people have that, excuse me, but I want you to know that it's available. But one thing I really like to do to attach vellum to cardstock is to use brads and either a piercing tool, or you can use a hole punch. I'm going to use the piercing tool today, and if you do that, you want to have a mouse pad or something underneath your surface. Finally, we just have some scratch paper that I'm going to put underneath my cardstock when I'm doing my embossing to catch all that powder to funnel back into the jar. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by embossing our 2 layers here. And you're going to want to do them separately because you need to keep your powder separate. So let's start first with the gold. Okay. So I'm going to put one in the center, and then I'm going to just kind of nest these around each other, going off the corners and the sides. And I didn't use an embossing buddy or a dryer sheet or anything to get the static off of this. That's always a good idea, but you do have an opportunity after you have put your powder on to remove those stray flakes, either with your finger or just by tapping it off or blowing it off. This is going to be covered up though by that vellum layer, so if you have a few stray flecks, it's just going to look like a little dusting of glitter, and that's fine. So I don't worry about that too much. Okay, now I have some that I'm going to blow away, but I want to wait until I funnel this back in or it's going to make a huge mess, and I've done that many times. You'll see how sticky this is. It's picking up all of that flower detail that was stamped off the edges. So I'm just going to brush that off. Okay. And then I'm going to blow this off. And just knock a little bit of this off. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to emboss this. And I really should have gotten that off first, but I had to cut one extra layer really quickly for this video. So you just want to hold it closely, but keep it moving so that you don't scorch the cardstock, which can happen. It is very hot. And wait until you see all of those details melt down. So you'll see it go from looking like a dull powder to a bright shimmer, and that's when you know that it's complete. Incidentally, when I was picking up a layer like this earlier, I accidentally grabbed the edge of it and made an impression with my finger. It caught the thumbprint right in that image. All I had to do was just go back over it and hit it with the heat gun, and it melted right back in. So I hope that helps you if that ever happens when you are in the middle of making your card. Okay, now let's go ahead and do our white layer. And we're going to stamp the same flower again in the Versamark ink. And I strongly recommend that you get a Versamark pad if you don't have one. You can always use your colored inks that match your cardstocks to do a watermark look, but there's just so many techniques that you can do with this, like popping pastels, obviously embossing, and I'll show more of those in videos, but it was the very first stamping purchase I ever made, and I still have the original pad. You can buy re-inkers for these. Okay, so let's go ahead and put on our white. And I know this is really difficult to see the embossing on this clear panel, but you'll see it in a minute. Okay, now let's put this back in the jar. And I'm going to stamp my greeting last because it takes a while for regular inks to dry on cardstock. You can blot them, but I don't want to blot it because I want to have that really true deep blue color. Okay, so we'll just gently hold this down. And this powder looks really vanilla when you first put it on, but then it turns white after you heat it. Okay, so for this technique, you always want to make sure that you are coloring on the back side of your cardstock. Then the ink is just going to be right behind that outline, and that's what's going to make it look like stained glass. So obviously you could do this with a black, a gold, a silver, a white, but I just thought that the white always looks gorgeous on vellum, like a frost. Okay, so let's start with our lighter blue, and I'm just going to swirl this around. And you can go right over that line, just right up to the edge and over it, because you're not going to see what's under it when you flip it. And keep in mind that whenever you're coloring on the vellum, it's going to be a little more muted when you flip it over, so you might want to use a deeper color. But just experiment with it. Okay, and then I'm going to use the green in the middle here for those little berries and the leaves. And it looks so messy underneath, but then when you flip it over, you have those nice borders of your image containing all that color. And then I'm just going to put on just a little bit of this darker blue. And I'm just going over those little veins in the middle of the leaves and around the edges to create just a little bit of shadow and more dimension. Okay, and when we flip it over, you have that really nice muted look. So we would just layer that onto our base here, and then I have a little place for the greeting. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach this layer. And the reason I wanted to use my piercing tool is that way I can make sure that they're all lined up. When I put my brads in, I don't want one to be noticeably higher or lower. So I'm just going about a 1/4 inch in on each corner. And you can do it on all 4 corners if you want. I'm just going to do them though at the top and then leave this vellum layer free at the bottom. This is a little pack of brads that I got from one of the Stamp TV kits. So I go back to these again and again. And I love how these little brads look with the center of these poinsettias, since they have those little berries. Just something to accent that little circle. Have that repeated in the design. I also tried this out after I finished with A Year of Flowers 2, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so that layer is attached now. And then I'm going to just put some adhesive onto my Good as Gold layer. And whenever I layer vellum over white cardstock or another colored piece, I like to have a reveal so that you see that border and you see the difference in the frosted layer and then the plain layer. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to put the greeting on right here. So that's how I decided how to position my flowers. So see, that really pops, and it's very easy to read, just those large letters on top of that vellum. And then we're going to put some adhesive onto this base. This is 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. And the card is complete. And here's a version that I also did with my Year of Flowers too, so you might like that for a more whimsical look. I hope you enjoyed the stained glass technique today and saw how easy it is to just add a beautiful frosted look of stained glass to your projects. Please visit my blog, Hands, Head, and Heart, for more inspiration and watch my videos on Stamp TV. I'd love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and again, I really recommend this A Year of Flowers book from Annie's Publishing. Thank you for watching today, and God bless.